Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be doing round number three of Demystifying Amulet Titan. The truth is that many things have changed and have evolved since the last time that I did a video like this one. I was actually checking earlier today, and the previous video is from 7 months ago. And back then, I remember that the real menace was Hogak that was putting a bunch of zombies into play thanks to Bridge from Below, and then basically going infinite and milling you out. So that was the last thing that we covered, and the list that we were playing looked very different to the lists that have been to what the list looks like today. A lot of things have changed, a lot of things have been a lot of new tools have been printed, and more than anything, the metagame has, of course, changed drastically. Not only because of the new and overpowered printings that happened this past year, which was, kind of like a mistake right after the other one. Um, so, but not only because of that, but also because of the bannings that actually followed. Someone who hasn't played since the banning, will you be talking about the new lines? Yes. When we talk about the new versions of the deck, I will be talking about. I'm not gonna be talking about like the basic stuff, right? Like all the things that I covered with Azusa and like Scout and all those plays. I already covered those in part number one, which if you're watching on YouTube, I certainly recommend you look at you look up the Mystifying Amulet, Amulet Titan Part One. I guess that the Part One doesn't say anything, but there's a Part One, there's a Part Two, and this is Part Three right here. So we're going to pick up where we left off, and this is again in the middle of Hogak Summer, and everybody is trying to beat infinite zombies coming from the graveyard and getting tapped in order to mill you out. So that is the main thread that we're looking at. One of the things that we actually looked into was to play devoted druid. That's actually the last thing that I covered in my video. Is we were experimenting with a list playing devoted druid, because devoted druid could get under the Hogak deck didn't have much interaction, and Devoted Druid could get under the Hogak deck and basically win out of nowhere thanks to Vizier, which we could finale for, or we could just turn into a Primeval Titan deck. Of course, we were splashing white for resting pieces in Path to Exiles, which was much easier thanks to the help of Gemstone Mine, Horizon Canopy, Crossroads, and all the bounce lands. We're going to talk about this as well again later today when we talk about the new printings. But this is where we left off. I was actually testing something like this. Still, around this era, this is when I actually looked all of these dates up. It was June 14th. That's when Modern Horizons was released. Okay, so a lot of things changed with Modern Horizons. A lot people are trying out new things. For example, we find it's really fun to like go into Goldfish and see what 5.0 lists look like back in the day. So we had lists like this one, for example, trying out Ren and Six. Trying to see if we can make Ren and Six work in the deck, where this will also represented the inclusion of cycling lands in Modern, which were not legal before this. Um, but this is what a list might have looked like back then. Of course, Red and Six proved to not be very good in Amulet and not be worth playing stuff like Trinket Thicket in your deck. But one thing that it's interesting to see is that the presence of cards like Tranquil Thicket actually pushed Amnesa, which is actually a very he actually um, basically brews a lot within the context of Amulet. We've played some Reclaimer lists here on stream that were, Amnesa's creation and stuff like that. So it's not weird to see a list like this from them. Um, but yeah, we're trying to figure out how to beat Hogak Summer. Of course, Ren and Six probably not the best way to beat Hogak Summer. But again, the going up to 30 lands And I actually on stream I talked about how much I loved playing 29 lands when everybody was playing 28, and then when we go on up to today and we're actually playing a full 30. So this is kind of like a pretty big, um, a low key revolution happening right here. Not even noticing that what was going on. Then one list that I wanted to showcase is somebody actually. There we go. Mavic Turner actually played the Hogak Pro Tour, the one that Torov Severin won with Mono Green Tron. He actually Matic actually, well, I guess Turner Matic the last name. He actually played this list at the event. As you can see, War of the Spark had been released not long ago, so we were still trying to test the War of the Spark cards. I was pretty high on Karn the Great Creator. I was messing around with different card configurations, how to best tackle the again Hogak and the metagame at that point. And I guess that Turner liked to have access to Hex Drinker. I have never liked that card in Amulet. I don't think it achieves anything, but I don't know. Maybe maybe they were good for him. But yeah, we're looking at a list with Karn the Great Creator, Blast Zone, some cards that I don't particularly love, but it's still interesting to see that the Amulet deck was very much in flux right here. We have not yet figured out how to beat Hogak. I'm going to talk about that later. But clearly the deck was in flux. There is no stock lists. Oh, thank you, Cameron. I appreciate it. We actually have no clear stock list like we do right now, so everybody's trying things out. Everybody is trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, how to best tackle the way that the metagame is developing. And yeah, lists like this actually are showing up. We see Grafdigger's Cage and Tomor's Crypt in the sideboard, both of them to kind of stop the Hogak menace. And that is actually going to be a constant during this time, where we have access to multiple cards that allow us to nuke the graveyard. And this is also when a nice little fella started making a comeback, Trinket Mage. Trinket Mage, as you might know, I did talk about Trinket Mage in both of my previous videos. In both of my previous demystifying videos, I mean. And Trinket Mage really shines when multiple things happen. And this is, as the Hogak thing kind of developed, one of the things that we realized is that two things. Trinket Mage is very, very good when the card Amulet of Vigor is very, very good, right? So in a metagame where you're trying to maximize how many looks you get at trying to find Amulet of Vigor, the card becomes obviously much better, right? Because Trinket Mage basically becomes virtual slower copies of Amulet of Vigor, right? Number two, Trinket Mage also shines when you have very impactful sideboard cards, like for example Tormod's Crypt, like for example Grafdigger's Cage, which we actually don't see in this list, which is interesting. Like Grafdigger's Cage, like Piling Needle. Whenever we see cards like this, of course, Trinket Mage's stock goes up significantly. So these are things that are very, very interesting for us to have in the back of our mind for whenever a situation like this arises, where all of these cards are actually more valuable or more important in a specific matchup, especially when it's against the indisputable best deck in the format like Hogak was. Then Trinket Mage is a card that we definitely want to be aware of, because that's when he gets to shine, basically. Okay, so going back to Trinket Mage actually was a very, very smart move during this era with busted graveyard decks. So we go to July 8th. In July 8th, what happens is Bridge gets banned. That is, Bridge from Below gets banned. And basically, the Hogak deck morphed. Okay, it changed a little bit. It wasn't so much of a combo deck, and it became a full-on aggro deck. Okay, another important thing that happened around this time is on July 12th, which is 4 days later. That was the M20 release, and at this point, basically the again, as I'm saying, there's nothing like a stock list at this point, right? People are messing around with different lists. They're playing Karn, they're playing Trinket Mage, they're playing Karn and Trinket Mage. So everybody's kind of like moving things around and trying to see what, throwing stuff at a dartboard and see what sticks, and then taking it from there. So when we are looking at a situation like this, what happens is, things start narrowing down a little bit, and things start to get a little bit more straightforward. And for example, when the Hogak deck changed its way that it killed you, basically, um, that's when Karn started to become basically, I don't want to say unplayable, but pretty close to it. So at this time, you're gonna see lists like, for example, I don't know who this guy is. I'm not familiar with him, but what he did is, we're looking at lists that now are trying to maximize playing more copies of Trinket Mages, taking more advantage of cards like Engineered Explosives, main decking Bojuki Bog, and at this point, as you can see, Field of the Dead was still a sideboard card. We were trying to figure out whether this card was good or not, but you're going to see Tormod Script and Grafdigger's Cage both finding its way towards the list. Another thing that happened during this time, Path to Exile. Path to Exile, of course, becomes the removal spell of choice, and in consequence, it also becomes the splash color of choice. So we're going to see that we're packing Cavitar Crossos, of course, Kavni Garden to block and stuff, but Cavitar Crossos, the full 4 Gemstone Mines, white from Boros Garrison, and Celestian Sanctuary as four copies. So we're trying to splash white because the exile clause in Path to Exile, of course, when your opponent is playing and replaying Vengevines and Hogaks, you want to make sure that those creatures are gone for good. And remember that now the Hogak decks only had access to 4 Carrion Feeder as sacrifice outlets, so this card obviously becomes more important. And because of the size of the creatures, we actually see cards like Nullhide Ferox starting to show their face. It's a very big difference if your opponent's playing Vengevine, if you have access to a 4/4, or if you have access to a 6/6. Pretty massive difference between both of them. So in this case, we are talking about going full on Trinket Mage because, as I was saying, not only we have access to the one-off cards in the graveyard that are very impactful. We also see a one-off copy of Pine Needle here, but also the card Amulet of Vigor was proved to be very relevant in the Hogak matchup specifically because it was the difference between allowing your Primeval Titan to attack and thanks to Boros Garrison and Stronghold, trade with a Hogak, or even better, if you had access to Samham as well, you could double strike and attack through a Hogak. So it was the difference between attacking through a Hogak or basically using your prime time to chump, not even chump, like to, I guess you're chump attacking a Hogak, but you're still getting trampled by 2. That card just was so absurd. But anyway, so that's very big difference between both cards, right? Like one of them, with an Amulet in play, the Titan actually pulls you ahead, while the other way around, the Titan is kind of like, coming down and hoping that we get there. So you're going to see that we're trying to go way harder on Trinket Mage in order to make sure that our Primeval Titan can actually attack through a Hogak. So that is definitely a very interesting aspect that kind of developed the more that we played the list, and of course the more that we played against the deck as well. Karn is amazing versus the Underworld combo. Oh, I can actually see that. Yeah. I'm this historian. Woke up at 4 a.m. to see the stream. Time zone sucks and took 20 minutes to get logged into my Twitch again. Oh, brutal fear. All right. So coming up next, we have So this is around the time where we are testing for Grand Prix Las Vegas, right? So Grand Prix Las Vegas is basically in the middle of a Hogak summer, right? Everybody's trying to work around Hogak, and I'm trying to find a list similar to the one that I. There we go. So here is a list, for example. This deck is not legal because it has Mycos inside it. That's hilarious. Um, so here is a list, for example, that tries to still work idolizing Karn the Great Creator. But as you can see, instead of playing Karn as a 4 of, now we're playing Karn as a 3 of because it's just really hard to keep up with what Hogak is doing. So we're looking at other alternatives. So we still see Tormod Script here. We see Liquid Metal Code, which I'm not a fan of, but whatever. Riley DK, thank you so much for the first subscription of the day. I appreciate the support. But yeah, now we're looking at 29 lands because we actually realized again that Field of the Dead was a way to keep up with Hogak's zombie production, right? We can actually use our own Titans in order to, kind of make up a bunch of blockers so we can kind of like overpower our opponent's threat production by just making a ton of chump blockers and even at some point potentially just like dudes the trade. Postmodern launch on a Titan might have been sick. Yeah, I wish I'd ever done that. I only postmodern launched back some dudes, some druids. How well is Lane of Sanguinis Cyborg if the meta continues to develop out to ban Snowblade, Dimit Ursa, and Sultai Uro? Well, I don't know why you would want Leyline against any of those cards, against any of those decks, Rickwork. Hey! What's up, Jarsec? Thank you so much for the Twitch Prime sub. Welcome back to the Primetime Stronghold. So let's see if I can find. There we go. This is the list that I ran at GP Las Vegas. As you can see, we're working with Trinket Mage. We are not playing Pact of Negation in the main deck. We're not playing Pact of Negation in the main deck for the first time in a very long time. But Pact of Negation simply proved to be a card that just like didn't do anything against Hogak because it just didn't matter. There was nothing that you wanted to counter, and they would just basically quickly run you over. So Pact of Negation became an effectively dead card. So instead of Pact of Negation, we started playing Arboreal Grazer as a creature that can come down earlier. It could chump block the 2/1 dudes, Bloodghast, and the zombie that comes back. I can't remember the name. It was also one drop that we could play earlier in the game in order to develop our mana. We actually, again, are seeing 29 lands with access to Field of the Dead in the main deck because of what we figure out that Field of the Dead was actually a way to try to keep up with Hogak. Field of the Dead was often copied with Vesuva. And Coalition Relic, couple of Trinket Mages, couple of Engineered Explosives, Gravecrawler, thank you, Jesus, and Walking Ballista in the main deck. Again, we're splashing white because of what we talked about earlier, and one of my favorite cards, honestly, from the potential Amulet sideboard in Celestial Purge. This card is actually absolute gasoline, was gasoline against the Hogak deck. It basically exiled over everything that we wanted to exile, barring Vengevines. That's what we had Path to Exile for. And it also exiled, this actually won me a match in the GP because it exiled Blood Moon as well. And the Mono Red Prowess actually proved to be one of the best foils to Hogak. And another one of the best foils to Hogak was Neobrand. So because of Neobrand, we actually see going up to the second Grafdigger's Cage in the sideboard, as well as the Tormod script we already talked about, plus by the Needle, plus an extra explosives. So As you can see, this list that I played at the Vegas event, actually very tuned, specifically targeted towards trying to beat an expected metagame. And it actually did that pretty well. It actually did that pretty well, which is something that I was very happy with, and it just made things a lot better for me during that event, where I ended up being the highest placing Amulet Titan player. I think it was like about like 100. I think I was 112. I was like two spots away from a pay bump, but it is what it is. Amulet number one summer production deck in modern, yeah, for sure. Legend doesn't protect from Sword of Feast and Famine. I thought maybe it could be a cute way to protect your hand getting fucked by Salty's Inquisition, but I guess it's just no. It just does. I So against any control decks, I also covered this when I talked about in the previous Demystifying Amulet, when I talked about cyborg options. Both I think that ley lines are by definition, with the current way that we build the deck, I think that any ley line is by definition just unplayable in Amulet. I think that the cost of putting a ley line in your deck is just extremely high, and not only because you don't want to draw them, of course, past turn zero for obvious reasons, but because the cost of having dead top decks in your deck is extremely high, and your sideboard slots are very precious. So I mean, you're not gonna play one ley line, right? You need to play at least two or three, maybe even four, and that's just too much. We just can't afford to do that. Which is, I saw some people even in Amulet decks playing four ley lines during Hogak Summer, and I'm just like, that's just not the way to approach the matchup, right? Because you would do that. Your opponent was already bringing in three or four Force of Vigors against you. They would force your ley line, and then they would just kill you. And now you had dead top decks that didn't impact the board, that you would draw at inopportune times. So I would much rather make sure that I can cast my top decks in turns one, two, three, or I can even search for them. Definitely a significantly better option. Even Mind Sensor. Thanks for the yeah, for sure, Rickwork. Again, I'm doing these streams precisely because I want to hear questions. So even if I have to derail a little bit about what I'm saying, I'm always very happy to answer questions. Of course, as long as they are good questions and they make sense. So we are at M20 release again. This is before the Hogak ban, and some people, I wanted to talk about this real quick. We see these guys start popping up. I never was a fan of Golos. It was basically like a 5 mana 3/5 half a Titan trigger, so it was like kind of like a way to bridge towards a Titan. But I think that it was just not very good. It didn't make your Titans better. It just didn't do anything, and the ability was basically flavor text, right? Because you need to spend 7 mana, and then like most of our deck is just air. So you would do that. You would activate Golos, and then you might end up exiling some relevant card, or you might activate Golos and reveal like a Pact of Negation and a Summoner's Pact or something, and then like you're tapped out, so you can't even pact and cast a Titan. It is just not good. But a lot of people tried it, and a lot of people liked it, so it's definitely it found its place in some lists somehow, even though I didn't like it and I didn't agree with its inclusion. Um, so yeah, sweet. Let's keep moving forward. Now we are looking at August 30th. August 30th is when bannings happen, and Hogak and Faithless Looting actually get got, which is pretty unexpected, honestly. Everybody knew that Hogak was going to get banned, but a lot of people were just not very like after Hogak was going to be banned. Nobody thought that Faithless Looting would be that much of an oppressor, but somehow it got banned. So decks like Hollow One ceased existing. So did the Phoenix decks. The Phoenix decks just don't exist anymore after this moment, and some of the like value faithless looting deck like Mardu Pyromancer and that kind of stuff, those decks just die. They immediately die because they needed faithless looting as an engine, because otherwise their cards were just not powerful enough with that without the powerful enabler. So the metagame, of course, really kind of like switch things up significantly. Here's a question for all the versions you will explain. What do you think of Uro in this deck? I'm going to talk about Uro when we get to nowadays, Dennis. Spell Runner Crew with the tier 1 subscription. Welcome to the Primetime Stronghold, Spell Runner. Thank you so much for the support. And yeah, make sure that you join the Discord, because today I will actually be presenting the updated Cyborg guide for my Twitch subscribers. So if you want to get a hold of that, make sure that you join the Discord. You link your Twitch account to your Discord account, and you're gonna be fine. That's how you're gonna get access to the Cyborg guide. Do you think that Rudik Thar is gonna go back to the Cyborg? I don't think that we're gonna see Rudik Thar ever again in the Cyborg of Amulet, unfortunately. He didn't need to go. Yeah, maybe. Maybe Faithless Looting didn't need to go. I don't know. Also, Stoneforge was unbanned. Yeah, Stoneforge was unbanned. That's actually a good thing to add. Yeah. Is it wrong that the reason I sub to use to learn to beat Titan better? No, as Skyly, that I'm trying to help everybody. Honestly, that's kind of the idea. And yeah, I mean, if you are taking advantage of the stream that way, sweet. That's awesome. If you have questions about how to beat Amulet, I am always very happy to answer them. After only the accounts, there is a wait time, which can go up to 2 hours. Yes, that's true, Dennis. Thank you so much for that. Underworld Rich combo is getting better. Yes, again, I'm gonna be talking about that later today. So all this stuff, we are right now at a point in time where Hogak is banned, Stoneforge isn't banned. Everybody goes nuts. Everybody starts playing Stoneforge decks. We even, I'm gonna show this real quick. We even play Stoneforge in Amulet. No, this was never really a thing, but somebody donated because they wanted to see Stoneforge in Amulet, so I brought up a Stoneforge list, which was pretty hilarious. It wasn't good. It wasn't good at all, but somehow we still managed to get a 4-1 here and there, because that's what we do here on this stream, right? We just get 4-1s. But yeah, so that was kind of a big deal. That was kind of a big deal as well, because the format slowed down a lot. The format slowed down a lot with the Stoneforge unbanning. Blue-white control decks started playing Stoneforge Mystic. We start seeing black-white decks resurgent as well. Same thing with mono-white decks. Everybody's trying to play Stoneforge Mystic in all sorts of shells. Jeskai, basically white never ever had seen this amount of play in the entire format, but we're at a point where people just like go nuts in order to play with Stoneforge Mystic. And one thing that you will note here is that, unlike what we see in Legacy, the sword of choice in Modern, since Stoneforge became part of the format, has been Sword of Feast and Famine. And the reason for this is pretty straightforward, and it's the fact that Modern is very, very populated by Primeval Titan decks, and by decks against which Sword of Feast and Famine's protection colors actually do matter. Also, the way that these decks are built, the decks that play Stoneforge, that is, the way that those decks are built, be it control decks and that kind of stuff, they really can take advantage of the lands and tap ability, as well as the discard, obviously, because they start accruing card advantage that way. But that is the main reason why you see Sword of Feast and Famine being the sword of choice over something like in Legacy, for example, we see Sword of Fire and Ice, right? Which is honestly just like a better sword, right? Like the abilities are just better. Basur Pro Red, and it just draws a card and it shocks something, whether it's your opponent or a creature. or a planeswalker, I guess. So of course the abilities of Words of Fire and Ice are way more relevant and way more impactful, but the Sword of Fire and Ice's color protection is pretty much irrelevant. Whereas in Legacy, we have cards like Tournament Nemesis, we have cards like Young Pyromancer that we want to attack through tokens and stuff like that. Here in Modern, we actually have Field of the Dead, right? Field of the Dead and Primeval Titan, green and black. Very conveniently, the colors that Sword gives you protection against. So things are very different in both formats, and this is why we see Sword of Feast and Famine being the most played sword by a very, very wide margin in Modern, as opposed to something like Legacy. And yeah, basically everybody started playing Stoneforge Mystic, and this is when I started doing a lot of winning. Because if you if you want me to tell you a secret, this card is very, very good against people trying to play this card. So here we're at a point where my win percentage is through the roof. We're going back to Karn, okay? Because I was a very, very, very big proponent of Karn during this era, because, of course, Karn is very good against equipment. Not only Sword of Feast and Famine, but you could plus your Karn on your opponent's Battle Skull, and you would turn the Battle Skull into a 5/5 for one turn, and then but the creature that was a 0/0 would just basically fall off and die. So it was actually very, very powerful. And during this era, I came back to Karn in full force, and I was killing it. I was actually at the top of the leaderboard for a pretty long time, playing mostly just Amulet with Karn. That was my weapon of choice, and I would 5-0 a lot. I'm trying to see if I have any list. I might have deleted them once the Lattice ban happened. Yeah, I think I just deleted them, unfortunately. Man, I wish I had access to some of those. I can probably go on Goldfish and find some lists from this era. Um, yeah, this is not my list, but this is very similar to what I was running. So at this point, Field of the Dead basically becomes a main deck staple. We start to see Field of the Dead all over the place. We start to see Karn again showing up his face. We are not playing a Trinket Mage anymore. Um, that's where we're making room for Karn, obviously. Down to 28 lands from the 29 that we were playing, and yeah, Pact of Negation finds its way back into the main deck again as a way to push through Karn against counter magic decks, because usually Karn would come down and just win the game. And yeah, I farmed a lot of tickets during this era. Force of Vigor, of course, a card that really shines against Stoneforge decks, because it allows you to, when your opponent goes all in, basically trying to get an attack through with an equipped like Ice Fang or something, you can just force force the equipment, and then you just take the one and they just blow them out pretty absurdly. We see Splashing a Brave. This also happened. Again, everybody's playing Stoneforge Mystic. What's great against Stoneforge Mystic and equipment? A card that kills with the 1/2, and a card that also destroys an artifact. So, as you can see, Amulet again adapted to the new list. We see Bojuki Bog in the sideboard as opposed to the main deck, because, again, Faith and Soothing was banned. Graveyard decks are pretty much non-existent anymore. Of course, there's a lot of value in the card Bojuki Bog, because it would come against control decks and stuff like that. But still, the name of the enemy after this point is Ursa. Okay, the Ursa deck, which was already pretty playable. It was already pretty playable during Hogak Summer, because it played multiple Words of Invention and main deck and sideboard and snaring bridges, which was one of the ways that you could kind of like sidetrack the Hogak deck, right? Just put a bridge in play, and unless they had one of their forces, then they were kind of done right there. So the Ursa deck actually rose in popularity significantly, and again, Karn the nuts against Ursa. Your opponent would have Moxopal, now they don't have Moxopals anymore. They want to try to go for a combo kill, now their combo does nothing. So Karn, very, very good, as you can see in this current metagame that was forming right here, and that's why we see him coming back to the top. Of course, cards like Mycosynth Lattice and Workwell Engine, staples in the sideboard that I have been championing. I was championing very strongly during this era, and yeah, this is what a list with Karn looked like at that point in time. And this was, in my opinion, this was the best deck in the format. And I was doing a lot of winning. I was doing a lot of winning at this time. It was a beautiful time. But yeah, it was fun. I'm a Storm player. Kelly is who told me about you. Oh, sweet, SN Galilee. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. What do you think about the black green Titan field deck with Thoughtseize, Ashia, Push, and Assassin's Trophy? We're gonna talk about that later. I'm gonna cover the Titan field decks and the evolution from Amulet, even though they changed gears completely and they were very, very far from being an Amulet deck. Could you help out with some combo matchups? Although Amulet can't really play it. Titan field, yeah. I'm gonna talk about that later. Will you publish a list of the cards in your Amulet box? I want to order cards using your affiliate link. Oh, to be able to adjust to different meta suite. Oh, sweet, Thalia. Yeah, that's actually a good idea. I will go ahead and I will probably make a video at some point, just upload it to YouTube, maybe just like with my phone camera or whatever, where I go through my Amulet box, because I have it in San Diego. I'm gonna be in San Diego this next weekend, so not this weekend but next weekend, and that's actually a cool little thing that I can do and kind of like upload it to YouTube or just to Twitter or whatever. So sweet. All right. So brand new modern metagame. Everybody's going nuts, and then it happens. October 4th, Throne of Eldraine is released. And boy, did that mess things up. In the beginning. Oh, I didn't talk about this. Oh, I totally forgot about this. I'm so happy I saw it. So, no Throne of Eldraine yet. This is actually during Hogak Summer. We actually played this list, and don't ask me how, don't ask me why, but I would be killing it with this list. This was actually like a brew by Grilled Cheese, who is the mod in the Amulet Discord, and he told me that he was having great success with this list, and I'm like, there's no way that's true. And I actually played on stream and started doing very, very well with it, and I'm like, wait a second, what's going on here? He called this Amulet Temple, which is a funny name, honestly. And what we're doing is basically we're just tempoing people out. In the beginning, the list actually had Remand. After some testing, Remand proved to be very, very bad, so we moved away from it. But it's basically like a mixture between like Mono Bluetron style counter magic in Condescend, Perilous Voyage as bounce spells, which was very, very good at bouncing stuff like Hogax or things like that. When they would try to play Hogak and you would just like bounce it a response or whatever. It was hilarious. And it actually worked. It actually worked. I did a fair amount of winning in this time. This might probably be after the Hogak bans because we're playing a braid in the sideboard as opposed to Path. Though I do think that I actually did test this during the Hogak summer, but this is probably afterwards with Stoneforge Mystic being advanced. So some more blue sources in order to make room for the voyages. Actually, one card that did find its way into some lists during this time that people were testing was Waterlog Grove. This is obviously the Canopy land that got printed in Modern Horizons, and it taps from green and blue, which obviously are color decks. And we are after some testing. Personally, I didn't like Waterlog Grove. I did try it out, and it just wasn't good enough in my opinion, and the damage was just becoming more relevant than it should be. So if you're planning on playing a blue-green land for whatever reason, it's probably a Botanical Sanctum. Of course, all of this changed after Throne got released, but we're going to talk about that in a second. I just wanted to showcase this list, which is a nice little bit of history right here. because it was a lot of fun. It was really fun to play this list. And honestly, I haven't played it in a while. I might do a stream where I try this list out and see what's up. It might not be worth it anymore because, just this list cannot really accommodate Castle Garenbrig because we want all the green and blue sources. But I might just make like a meme stream or something where I bring back this list just to see what's up. Um, yeah. So the reason we're testing Ferox over Baloth is because at this point the mono red prowess and the burn decks were not really that much of a threat, and because people were playing Stoneforge Mystic, people started running K command. And K command decks really struggle much more against Nullhide Ferox than they do against Baloth. Because a 6/6 is bigger than a Tarmogoyf in most situations, while a Baloth is smaller than a Tarmogoyf. So, because we were trying to target more of the K command decks as opposed to the aggro decks, that's why we see Nullhide Ferox instead of Ostinate Baloth. So that's the reason for that. The account for the guide, something like that. I'm sorry if I butchered your name, but yeah. So that was the idea. Again, just wanted to showcase this real quick, but we're talking about the release of Throne of Eldraine. Throne of Eldraine brought some powerful tools and some problems. Both of those were brought up with Throne of Eldraine. Number one, I actually made a video talking about the card Once Upon a Time and how I didn't think that this card was going to be better than Ancient Steerings. Boy, was I wrong. Boy, was I wrong. Turns out that even if you are casting this for its actual cost, it's not that bad because of the interaction with Bounce Land. Oko was gone too late. It wasn't gone too soon. Uh, the interaction with Bounce Lands and Amulet with Once Upon a Time, it's actually very, very powerful because you can, you turn one, you go ahead and you play your Amulet, right, of any land or whatever. And when you have an Amulet in play, you can play your Bounce Land, you can trigger the Amulet, you can put the Bounce trigger on the stack first and the untap trigger later, which means that the untap trigger will resolve first. So what you can do is you can Once Upon a Time while you still have the bounce trigger on the stack, and this way you actually get access to much more information because you know what are going to be the 5 cards. Like, you're going to know whether you find the card that you're looking for or not. So for example, if it's turn 2 and I'm looking for an Azusa and I only have a single bounce land, I can do this, and then I Once Upon a Time with the bounce trigger still on the stack. If I find an Azusa, then I know that I have to bounce the same land again so I can play my Azusa next turn. If I don't find the Azusa, but I found a different bounce land, then sweet. Now I know that I need to bounce the other land, so I can continue developing my mana base as I am. I can continue making my land drops while still making sure that I have a bounce land in hand. So this interaction proved to be, and this is one of the things that I said when I was talking about Once Upon a Time, is one of the things that might happen is I'm very much undervaluing the instant speed aspect of this card, and I was very much undervaluing the instant speed of this card. That interaction comes up a lot, and when it does, it's very, very powerful. Also, the fact that you can hold up stuff like Dismember or stuff like that or even like Spell Pierce and Negate in counter Magic matchups. While if they don't do anything on your turn, then you can still cantrip. Those things are very, very powerful. Yeah, it's Once Upon, I think. Yep, there we go. Only watch FTC streamers, so I made an account to get a cyber guide from a streamer. Oh, that's funny. I wasn't very clear that. That's very cool. Um, I made the account for the guy. That's hilarious. Okay, so yeah, so Once Upon a Time proved to be very quickly turned on to be a staple in Amulet. And at one point, we were running 28 or even 27 lands. Yeah, so we were running 27 lands. We see the evolution here. Um, we're running. This is where things started. We're running 28 lands, and we're running 4 Ancient Steerings, 3 Once Upon a Time. I started running 2 Once Upon a Time, then I went up to 3, then I went up to 4 after like a week or two of testing. And also once the card became more available, because it was very, very hard to find. I remember I was literally the only streamer that had access to the card for like a couple of days. Um, and yeah, things quickly went up from there because this card proved to be very, very good. So at least at this point in time, we're running a list with multiple Once Upon a Times. Don't look at this Golos. This was just like a thing that I was doing. So we're playing multiple Once Upon a Times. We're playing multiple Ancient Steerings as well, and we're trying to maximize our cantrip suite while trying to make our deck as streamlined as possible. Just 4 Azusa, 4 Primetime, 4 Scout. Let's go. Trying to do this kind of thing. Yeah, Amulet Bridge hasn't been a thing for a while. Yeah, here we have access to Field and Dead in the main deck. We still have not. At one point, we kind of like ignored Hornet Queen from this point, and the Hornet Queen was replaced by a second copy of Field of Dead because it basically did the Hornet Queen thing, except it did it better. So the goal is too distracting indeed, yeah. So yeah, so this is what a list looked like at this time, and this was very, very powerful. One of the things that you're gonna see here is one Fry. The reason for the Fry is at this point people started really going ham on Ursa, and this card was very good against Ursa. Even when people started playing multiple Ashioks in the sideboard and Oko, we are going to see that more newer lists would actually go even higher up in Fries, up to 2 or maybe even 3, in order to make room for that card. And we're going to talk about another sideboard card that proved to be very, very important during this metagame, which is Mystical Dispute. But yeah, so this is the list that we're looking at around this point in time. Again, people are still messing around with Stoneforge Mystics, so you still see Abrades. Humans actually made a little bit of a comeback during this time, so you're going to see Engineered Explosives as well. With obviously the Abrade and the Hornet Queen being there mostly for the humans matchup. But yeah, things are developing very nicely with Once Upon a Time. Then we experiment with Once Upon a Time and cut in Ancient Steerings for Explore. And I want to make one very important point about Explore and why we hadn't been playing Explore before. I remember testing some card lists with 4 Explore and 28 lands, and they were terrible. They were so bad that I just basically never revisited them again. Now, why are we playing Explore now? Well, the answer to that question is very, very simple. This. Castle Garenbrig, even though I was skeptical at first, turned out to be absurd. And as you can see, we're moving away from Gemstone Mine, and we're starting to see breeding pools show up their ugly face, because it's honestly a pretty ugly art. But we're gonna start to see breeding pools showing up their face in our amulet decks. We're gonna see more a higher basic forest count as well, because we're trying to maximize this card. This card proved to be extremely, extremely powerful. Did you cover the decks that play Dimensional Symbols? Yeah, I covered those in the first and the second Demystifying Amulet decks. Demystifying Amulet video, sorry. So you can check them out if you are interested in those. Juegos más tierra por dentro se forma mejor. Sí, sí, Rulo, ahora iba a hablar de eso. So Castle Garenbrig plus Explore is actually a very real thing. And why is this? Because now, thanks to the Scout, and that's also the reason why we see Scout and we don't see Grazer anymore in these lists, is because Scout by itself, even without an amulet, can now yield us a turn 3 Titan. Which is, again, what we're trying to maximize, right? We're trying to make sure that we have turn 3 Titan or better, or hopefully better, or better literally every game. That's how we win. That's how we become. That's why we are a good deck, right? And again, at this point, I think it might have been one of the best decks in the format before the Simic Ursa deck was discovered. I think Amulet was the best deck in the format. Then the Ursa deck, or the Ursa Oko deck was recovered, and obviously that was the best deck in the format by a significant margin. But during this time, this was a great discovery. If you play Scout on one of a basic forest, of a breeding pool, of a gemstone mine, whatever, if you play Scout on turn one, that means that you can play your land drop, and you can flash another land from Scout, and then you can play another on your turn three. You can play two untap lands, one of those being a castle, or at any point in time you need to have two untap lands and one castle, and two extra green sources. So Scout by itself would now allow you to cast a turn three Primeval Titan, and Explore actually did something similar thanks to Amulet of Vigor. Okay, so you go turn one Amulet, turn two Explore plus another land, and then if one of those lands that you had was a castle, and then your land for turn when you had an Amulet in play was any bounce land, now you could cast a Titan with Amulet. So that's why we see Explorers making a resurgence right here. Also, the fact that we went up to 29 and then later on 30 lands was actually kind of a really big deal, because it made extra copies of Explore not become so clunky, because you would also be able to take advantage of the extra land drop that Explore provides. Because if that happened, like if you're running 4 Explorers and you miss on the Explore trigger, like you miss on the extra land drop effect, then of course Explore is just a terrible card. So it is very very important that we actually went up on one and then afterwards two lands in order to make sure that we can get the most value from Explore. Another thing that you're going to see during this time is I was a pretty big proponent of main deck Reclamation Sage, and the reason for this is solely because of Karn the Great Creator. Karn the Great Creator decks, which would be Eldrazi and Mono Green Tron. At this point in time, both decks were playing Karn because Karn was very good against Ursa. So both decks are playing Karn, and if Karn the Great Creator would go and get Ensnaring Bridge in game one, you literally had no outs. So by having access to the one of Reclamation Sage in the main deck, we're giving ourselves an out to this. Also, the Ursa deck at this point, it wasn't still the Simic Ursa deck, but it was the Grixis Wersa deck. So that deck could go Piting Needle on Engineered Explosives plus Ensnaring Bridge, and it would again be a lock that we could just not come out of. So even though in many matchups Reclamation Sage was just a terrible card, it was still, in my opinion, worth including just to make sure that we have an out to some of the best decks in the format, having access to a way that we can't beat, a combo, quote unquote, that we just cannot beat. So this is this is before Castle, this is after Castle, and then we are actually starting to try out to go harder on Castle. Yeah, we have we tried a Boreal Gracer. Some people actually tried Dom Harvey was known for trying out Sky Shroud Ranger. For those of you that don't know, Sky Shroud Ranger is strictly worse Sacred Drive Scout, but it's the same effect. So we did actually see a very very short resurgence of this card before people actually started to move on to a very very Castle Garenbrick heavy build of the deck with a 3 or slash 4 with 3 or 4 Castle Garenbricks in the deck. And this is this is a list that I played in Austin. But before I talk about this list, actually this isn't the list. I played 2 Okos in Austin. But before we talk about this list, I want to talk about that card, Oko. So Oko came and became a problem. Oko kind of started taking over the format. Everybody was just playing Oko in the deck, just flashing, even sometimes blue and green for Oko. There was very, very famously there was this person who just went ahead and 5-0'd with an Oko burn list, which is pretty hilarious. So that actually happened somehow. But oh yeah, actually, this is the list that I played in Vegas, that I played in Austin, but we're missing the two Oko. Yeah, so this is actually the list. Sweet. Glad to see that it's not gone. But yeah, Oko took over the format. Everybody under Mum were playing Oko, and it was just a little bit too much. Yeah, John was splashing for Oko. Devoted Druid decks were jamming Oko. Of course, the Grixis Ursa decks started jamming Oko, and then the more that people started playing this deck, it was the Team Lotus Box guys from the SCG circuit that figure out, yo, so this Oko card is pretty good. Maybe we should just play the full four, and they started doing that. So they created the Simic Ursa deck, which was completely ridiculous. We had like Emry, another card that was printed in Throne of Eldraine, obviously. Emrys as a 4-off to cycle with to use Bubble and replay Bubble, drawing multiple cards a turn. Astrolabe, obviously. We also had access to Goose, which was pretty absurd too. This card basically became unplayable after the Oko, but Goose allowed you for a very easy turn to Oko that actually created food and turned your Goose into a mana creature that was reliable. So this deck kind of started dominating the format. Oko spiked to like 70 or 80 tickets on Magic Online, and like I think like $60 in paper. It was ridiculous. This card dominated literally every single format. People even were playing Oko in Vintage. It broke Standard. It broke Pioneer. It broke Modern. Literally every format was host by this card, and slowly but surely, Wizards started banning the deck in every format. So first they banned it in Brawl, then they banned. I think they banned it in Brawl and Standard at the same time. Then they banned it in Pioneer. In the middle, they banned it in Historic, or they like soft banned. I can't remember how they say they prohibited or something. Um, and and finally, they banned it in Modern. But before they banned it in Modern, the last hooray of Oko was in GP Austin, which I did have the pleasure of attending, and where I played this list. As we can see, this list is also very, very heavily geared towards beating the metagame that I expected. So we're gonna see multiple things that in this list that are trying to take advantage of the metagame. Number one, you're gonna see two main deck Field of the Deads. Testing showed that Oko actually really struggled against Field of the Dead. So what ended up happening is people started playing multiple Field of the Dead decks, and Field of the Dead even created, thanks to the crazy manic mastermind that is Dominic Harvey. Oko created its own little primetime archetype, which I'm going to touch on in a second, because it was actually the deck that won this Grand Prix. So I'm going to talk about this list first. So while we are we're in this like madness format, we're trying to maximize in this list the explore synergy that I described a little bit earlier, and we're doing so with 3 Castle Garenbrig because we wanted to make room to a second cavern in the main deck, which was extremely important in the Ursa matchup, and with the second Field of the Dead in the main deck, which was also extremely important in the Ursa matchup, as well as being very, very relevant in the Field Titan matchup, which I'm going to talk about in a second. So what we have here is a list with 30 lands, full on 30 lands, again trying to maximize on Explore. We have access to Amulet, we have access to Scout. Once upon a time, no steerings anymore. There's just no time to steerings. And again, Amulet is not a very, very good card when your opponent can just turn it into a 3/3 Elk. So this version of the deck basically ignores ancient steerings altogether, and instead we're trying to make sure that we attack where we can't get disrupted, which is in our mana base. Because one thing that the Simic Ursa deck didn't have is a way to mess with your mana. They didn't really play in a Field of Ruin or anything like that, so they couldn't really mess with your mana besides like bouncing your bounce land or whatever. So We're trying to maximize our turn 3 Titans in a different way by using Scout and Explore in order to making sure we hit our land drops. We play multiple caverns in the main deck as well as multiple fields in the main deck. And we only go down to 2 Tolaria West. This is actually very, very interesting. And this is a development that the first ones that I saw doing was Matt Dilks and company. Um, and the reasoning for this is that, as I was saying, primetime became a little bit less important in that you could just win these matchups with Field of the Dead. So you just don't need as many ways to find your Titan because you only need to find one Titan, right? You are not gonna be chaining Titans, which was kind of like the signature play pattern, right? Um, Now we don't need to do that as often as we used to because we have access to Field of the Dead as an alternate and an even harder to interact with win condition. So because of this, we actually go down to 2 Tolaria Wests to make room for the second Field of the Dead, which I thought was a very, very smart move and potentially, I mean, definitely the correct one. We see access to main deck Bojuki Bog. This is because one of the ways that the Ursa deck got ahead and stayed ahead is with early Embries getting back Mistress Bubble and replaying them every turn, which Bog stopped, and also with Mystic Sanctuary loops. So they would use Mystic Sanctuary. They would use the card Mystic Sanctuary in order to put a cryptic command on top, so they would basically lock you out of the game by using and rebuying that cryptic command thanks to Mystic Sanctuary, and then drawing a card with a Mistress Bubble or something like that. So basically, the top of the deck would always be a cryptic command. So they would just tap and draw, tap and draw, tap and draw every turn, and they would lock you out of the game that way. Bojuki Bog stopped that loop, sorry, and so did Ghost Quarter. So that's why we see both Bojuki Bog and Ghost Quarter being in the main deck. Of course, as I stated earlier, we see the one of Reclamation Sage that I chose to run over the fourth Explorer that a lot of people were running, and this is because of Eldrasitron also being very popular because it was just a solid deck against the Ursa deck. So we saw a lot of Eldrasitron during this time, and I just talked about the potential that turn 3 card into a Snare Bridge could just be game over, especially when back tap with a Chalice, right? So having access to a main deck answer to the lock proved to be very important, and in fact it won me 2 matches in the GP. So I was very, very happy with the main deck Rec Sage for sure. Going out to T-West was a big deal, but they're worth it. Yeah, again, it's because of a change in the paradigm, change in the win condition. When we move on to the sideboard, usually in the past, we have run negates, we have run spell pierce, we have run swan song, and now what we see is mystical dispute. The reason for running the full 3 copies of Mystical Dispute is because of this card, because of Ursa, obviously, because of cards like Cryptic Command, and of course, because of a card that proved to be a really, really big pain in the ass. When this card was first spoiled, nobody was playing it. Nobody was playing it. I saw the spoiler and I said, wow, that card is a beating, but it seems narrow enough that nobody will be playing multiple copies of this card in the sideboard. What I didn't take into consideration is the fact that Amulet became one of the top contenders in the format. So basically, Ashiok became a 2 or 3 off in a lot of sideboards. And this Ashiok is really, really hard for Amulet to beat. So a ton of decks started running this card. I'm going to talk about, the Ursa deck that we're talking about right now. Grixis Shadow started running this card. 4-color Shadow as well. The Titanfield decks that I'm going to be talking about in a second as well, they did play Ashiok Dream Render. So this card kind of became omnipresent in every sideboard, making the sideboard card of choice to be Mystical Dispute. So that's why we see a full 3 copies of Mystical Dispute, no other counterspells. Again, this is a very, very heavily um, straightforward format, basically, where basically the only thing that we care about countering is going to be in the Ursa matchup. We're not very worried about Tron. We're not very worried about any other deck, really, any other control or combo deck, basically. So all we wanna target is we want to have the best tool for the job against Ursa, Oko, and Ashiok. So that's why we're packing a full 3 copies of Mystical Dispute. These members also killed Ursa. We see both Obstinate Bailiff and Radiant Fountain. This is something that I wasn't really a big fan of, but I did it because everybody was telling me that the mono that Texas was a state where everybody just played aggro decks, so like Burn and Mono Red Prowess were like some of the more popular decks in the format in this state. So I'm like, okay, so I'm going to try to be prepared. In reality, I did not play against a single aggro deck in the entire weekend. So uh, it didn't, this one, it didn't really pan out, but it was what it was. And the Tectonic Edge was mostly there for the mirror against Eldrazi and against the deck that I'm going to talk about right now. So Grand Prix Austin 2020. Top 8. Why is it so hard to find this? All right, finally figure it out. All right, so Grand Prix was won by Christopher Candevra. And this list was actually a creation of Dom Harvey. Dom figured out that with the amulet shell, okay, we can just take out 4 amulets, bring in 4 Okos. Done. Easy. Now we change our mana base to adapt accordingly, so we're not gonna see as many bounce lands because, of course, without amulet, the power of the bounce lands goes down considerably. But we are playing, and this, of course, we're seeing like the last iteration of this deck, right? But we see Silver Explorer. That's hilarious. It's actually for Explorer. But we see, like Segura Tribe Elder, Primeval Titan, one of Craterhoof, Arboreal Gracer over Scout. Obviously, when you don't have Amulet, Gracer is just like almost just a strictly better card. Once Upon a Time, obviously, Search for Tomorrow, Summer's Fact, and then we have 30 lands with full 4 castles, 3 caverns, 3 fields, and basically a deck that was mostly geared towards beating Urza, right? And we see that not only in the main deck, because this basically covers the entirety of, all of Urza's angles. Yeah, we even have access to. Oh, we actually don't have access to the Bojuka Bog. Look at that. This list didn't have Bojuka Bog, but we have like 3 main deck Cavern Souls. We have 3 main deck Field. I thought about how important. I talked about how important this was, and one of Tolera West with the Cynical Chamber in order to transmute to Find Titans and Chain Titans if necessary. But this is very much a Field of Dead deck that had access to Oko, which could play it pretty reliably on turn 2 thanks to the Grazer. In the sideboard, we see a boy, Gal. I think it's actually a non-binary Ashiok. So we see the Ashiok in the sideboard. So I apologize for that. But yeah, Ashiok in the sideboard, full 4 Mystical Disputes. So we really see Tireless Tracker. We really see a sideboard geared towards beating Ursa. Decay in order to kill opposing Okos. Basically, everything is tried to. It's like a better deck against the Ursa deck. And I think that was just a fact. And we can see I don't think that Christopher himself was featured much besides in the finals or like in the top 8, but in the finals match, you can see how he just like demolishes his Ursa opponent because the entire deck is just built to beat that deck, right? However, the way this deck played out, and we actually saw this after playing it right here on stream, is a lot of people were calling this deck amuletless, which I thought was a horrendous naming convention because this deck is very, very far from an amulet deck. This deck was much, much closer and played out way closer to a Scapeshift deck than it did to an amulet deck. Because this is not really a toolbox deck. This is more of a deck built in order to maximize this card specifically. So, because the toolbox affix is almost non-existent, we have like one of Bloodstone and the one bog in the sideboard, and like maybe a Ghost Quarter, and that's about it. Like everything else is just built to make sure that we can maximize Field of Death. So the toolbox aspect of the deck is basically non-existent, and I always thought that it was very very misleading to call this deck amuletless when in reality it was more like blue green scape shift less as opposed to as opposed to amuletless. But yeah, I thought I would showcase that because that actually was created from the amulet shell by Dom, even though it ended up played in a much different way. And talking about this, one thing that I messed around with also on stream was with a very similar list, but instead of splashing blue for Oko, I was splashing white for, we don't see it in this list specifically, but I was splashing white for Knight of the Reliquary, and then having access to a white sideboard where again Celestial Purge is very very good again at destroying Ashiok and destroying Ashiok specifically, but yeah, so basically Dom, without even realizing, he kind of like gave birth to a completely new style of deck that saw birth from the amulet shell, but it ended up playing in a much much different way. So that was just very very cool, and I thought it was pretty awesome. Um, is this on stream right now? In your opinion, better than the Dryad version? No, no. I'm talking about the history of Amulet throughout the past 6 or 7 months. So no, this is the list that I played at GP Vega. So obviously it is outdated. Now that Oko is dropped to $15, it's much more easy to afford this deck. Oh, Moondrews, yeah, for sure. um, Lower the number of slivers and increase the number of amulets and titans. That's hilarious. That's fun. All right, so things to cover. Things that we have covered all the way up to here were with the Throne of Eldraine madness, and yeah, we talked about. I made some notes here, so I'm making sure that I'm covering all of that. Oh yeah, okay, cool. So let me talk here for a second about the card Castle Garenbrig. I already talked a little bit about the upsize of this card and why we are trying to build our deck in order to maximize this card. Even in this list, as you can see here, where I am playing 3 basic forests and 3 breeding pools. Again, trying to maximize blue sources for the sideboard and mystical disputes and for the sideboard Okos, which were very very important in the Ursa matchup, obviously. So having access to untapped blue on turn 1 was proved to be very very relevant. So that's why I'm going down on basics. So the card Castle Garenbrig has tremendous upside. The upside really is tremendous, and we have seen this on stream multiple times where I'm playing against something like John or whatever, and I have a Titan in hand, and my opponent has been like fulminating my lands or something, and then we get to a point where I have like basic forest, land X, and I top deck a Castle Garenbrig, and it's just the crowd goes wild, and it just allows you to play a Titan. It comes into play untapped if you have a basic or one of your breeding pools, and it just casts Titan immediately. It doesn't make you wait like a semi-growth chamber. It doesn't. This is also the reason why it synergizes very well with both Explore and Scout. It also allows for some brand new play patterns that we actually did not have access to before, which is very very interesting. So let me explain. If we go, let's say that we go turn 1 or turn 2 Amulet, it doesn't matter, and we go like let's say that we go turn 1 Cavern, turn 2 Castle, and we play an amulet or whatever. If we top deck, let's say that we're missing an Azusa or a Titan, if we have any of this, now if we have any bounce land that taps for green, so any of these bounce lands, if we have any of these bounce lands, now we can actually cast a Titan on turn 3. Because we can cast the Azusa off the Cavern of Souls using Simigirl's Chamber. Let's use Simic as an example. Simigirl's Chamber, then we replay the Simigirl's Chamber twice and we activate Castle Garenbrig mana, and we actually have Titan mana on turn 3. This play pattern was not possible before. There were no combination of cards that would allow you to, with only 2 lands in play and an amulet, to cast Azusa and Titan in the same turn. It was not possible. You just needed to either have a second amulet or it was not a possibility. Okay, so Castle also allows for some extra play patterns. I already talked about how a scout by itself can give you Titan mana. So Castle has a ton of upside, a ton of upside. However, there is a very, very real cost, and we see this in the sideboard right here. We're running 3 copies of Dismember. That's it. Splashing is not realistic anymore. Splashing is not realistic anymore. We're only playing 3 green lands, right? 3 green bounce lands, sorry. And even if we play, let's say we want to splash white, even if we play 3 copies of Celestial Sanctuary and we play the Kavira Crossroads instead of the Radiant Fountain, and let's say that we still play Borders Garrison and 1 Gemstone Mine, that is 6 white sources. That's just not enough. That's just not enough to be able to cast your cards. Even though, for example, right now I would love to be able to splash for Celestial Purge. Not doable. It's just not a thing that we can afford to do. Because it's just not enough. And those are cards that you want to cast whenever you want to be able to cast before you resolve your Titans. Because obviously, after you resolve a Titan, you can cast whatever the hell you want, right? But because you can get whichever lands you need. But when you before you resolve a Titan, which is when you really want to make sure that you're able to cast these cards, because you want to get rid of an Ashiok, you want to get rid of a Death Shadow that's clocking you or whatever, then just 6 white sources is not enough. So if you're playing Castle, I think that splashing any color is just not realistic. One thing that I have tried in the past before I decided to go full on Castle Garenbrig, because I thought it was just too powerful to ignore. One thing that I was doing at one point is I was just playing a couple of Castle Garenbrigs, and I was playing just the full 4 Gemstone Mines, and I was still splashing white, for example. Now, if we bring back all the Gemstone Mines, now things are a little bit more reasonable, right? Because now we're going to have access to 8, 9 white sources, which is not ideal, but it's something that you can do, I guess, and you might be able to get away with it. And this extra the castle that you're not playing, it can be like a Horizon Canopy in order to give you a 10th one or something like that. Maybe a Razorverse Thicket. So there's definitely a cost to playing Castle in your deck, but there's a lot of upside. Even one upside that I did not talk about is if you go turn 1 land, right, and you're developing your mana, and you go turn 2 Castle instead of going turn 2 bounce land, and your opponent plays a Damping Sphere, it's so much less devastating, right? Because you're still making your land drop, and your Castle Gurmrig is still tapping for a green color under a Damping Sphere, right? Which is, of course, a very, very popular sideboard card that we always need to be aware of. So Castle definitely has a lot of upsides. In my opinion, it has a higher upside in order to help us kind of execute our game plan than the upside that splashing a color would be for our sideboard. So personally, I think that Castle is the truth. In fact, if you look at the list that I'm running currently, I'm playing the full 4 copies of Castle. I think that this card is just the nuts. But I thought that I wanted to, talk a little bit about this card specifically, and why I think that this card is kind of like, it invalidates the possibility of splashing a color, and I think that's fine. I think it's fine, and it's okay. Um, all right. So, do we have any questions in chat so far? Up until this point, man, 1 hour and 20 minutes. We're not even done. Just getting warmed up here. So I'm gonna take a little quick break because I've been talking nonstop for 1 hour and 20 minutes, even more than I talk when I stream gameplay. But yeah, I'm gonna take a quick break. Hopefully you're gonna stay here because we're gonna be back in just 1 minute. I just want to drink some water and walk around the house for a second. So um, and then we can continue. We can continue talking about this. So don't go anywhere, and I'll leave you with some little music while we wait.
A sun that shines in front of my eyes, a new breaking dawn, guiding me, the contrast of the sea, healing my skin. So I feel these burns, white nights so late, right here inside myself. The illusions will end, our futures ahead. No more. Ooh, yeah. No answer was left, no disillusions at all. At last his mind will shine again.
All right, we're back, and we're gonna keep this party going. Um, no questions in chat. That's cool. We're gonna keep with the scheduled program. All right. Play this list in GP Austin. I top 64. Very, very excited about this. My best finish at a GP so far. So super excited. Immediately the next day, Banhammer hits. Oko gets banned. Nobody is surprised. However, let me tell you, the other one surprised us. Moxopo also gets banned. Mycosine Lattice also gets banned. I am absolutely perplexed about these last two ones. The Moxopo one, I can see it. I think it's fine. It's justifiable. But I honestly didn't think it was particularly necessary. After Oko was gonna get banned, the Ursa decks were going to need to adapt, and I think that it would have been fine if the other Ursa decks were playing Mox Opal. I actually talked about this on stream, and I talked about this on Nikachu's channel as well. Little plug there for my friend Nikachu. Great guy. He has a very cool YouTube channel, the Merfolk Master, and we actually talk about how a lot of decks that were just fine for the format just disappeared. Like, you cannot play Affinity anymore. You cannot play Harlan Scales anymore. Those decks, were just perfectly fine in power level for the format. Even the Ursa decks with Grixis, the Grixis Ursa Wear decks, those are fine in power level. The problem that Ursa had more than anything else, the Simic Ursa, was that it literally had no weaknesses. The deck had no weaknesses whatsoever. It could be literally anything. There was no card that you could put in your deck that you could actually go ahead and beat. There was nothing that you could do. Any Prism deck, yeah, I guess the Word Prism deck also died. Lantern also died for good. Those decks kind of just became unplayable. Lantern was kind of unplayable before that, but still, every now and then you would see a Lantern player 5-0. Now you just don't anymore. But yeah, I was very surprised by the Vox Opal ban. But it is what it is. And then the Mycosynth Lattice ban, I just don't understand. Unless Lantern won a PT, yeah, for sure, in the hands of my good friend Luis Salvato. But yeah, Lattice Opal died for Ursa Sins. It's possible. It's also possible that Wizards kind of like started seeing the fact, like, they knew that they were gonna print Underworld Breach or something. But yeah, it is what it is. It's just like the way that the format moved, and it's fine. Veil, Aqua, and Ursa should have gone. No, I think that Ursa's fine. I mean, now Ursa is fine in terms of power level for the format, right? It's not egregious like it used to be. It's just a very, very solid card, but it's not like ridiculous, because now, even if you see like what the good decks, the good Ursa decks in the format are right now, like the similar Ursa deck that Eli Cassis has been championing for a while now, those decks play like 12 artifacts, 15 artifacts at most. So when Ursa comes down, it's just like it taps for like 1 or 2 mana. It's not like Ursa comes down and there's like random opals sitting around and random like uh, food tokens sitting around, and then Ursa comes down and now you have access to 8 mana. No, like you just hardcast your Ursa and you have like 2 more mana that turn. Like, that's fine. I think that the power level of Ursa is perfectly fine for modern. And again, if even with Mox Opal, like if you look at the blue black Ursa deck as an example, it right now it plays like 12 or 15 artifacts that they could just not support a Mox Opal, right? So like at that point, it's just like Mox Opal would have been for the other Ursa deck, like the Grixis Ursa decks. With nowadays, they kind of um, look something like this. But like, if you put a Mox Opal here, it's not like this deck becomes broken, right? You just play a Collector Oof or what's his name, Stony Silence, and like this deck is gonna have a really hard time killing you, right? That's gonna buy you enough time to make sure that you can destroy the Ursa or like the Thopter Founder or whatever. Like, that is the problem. Like, the other deck didn't have weaknesses. This one does, and if you want to beat this deck, you can do it very easily, honestly. So I think that it's, yeah, again, like it's just what it is. It's fine. Like, we're done. But yeah, this is what Ursa decks look like nowadays. We have, what is it, 16 artifacts? Yeah, 16 artifacts total. That's so little, right? It couldn't even support Mox Opal if it wanted to. So yeah, it's certainly fine in terms of power level. Ursa, that is. But all right, so all these cards get banned, and Mycosynth Lattice also gets the ban hammer. The Mycosynth Lattice ban, I really honestly don't understand. Like, if your opponent spending 10 mana over 2 turns in order to lock you out, and with a lock that you can actually kind of easily get out of if you just clear the card somehow, I don't know. I kind of don't agree really with the lattice band, but it's again, it's just kind of whatever. It's certainly interesting though, and this is the world that we live in, starting from January 13th. Okay, so we had a short time in between January 13th and January 24th, where Amulet was indisputably the best deck in the format, and a list during this time looked something like this. A list during this time looked something like this. We have 4 Castle Gernbrig, 4 Breeding Pool, 4 Forest, 4 Snow Basic Forest, two Breeding Pool. Sorry. So this is what my list looked like during this time. I was again fortunately doing a lot of winning because this list was absolute gasoline. Now with Lattice Band, there's way less Karn decks and way less artifact decks as well because there's no Mox Opal. So Rex Sage being in the main deck doesn't make as much sense anymore. So I am just going ham on the 4 Explorer and with the 4 Castles, just making sure that I can maximize my turn 3 Titans in the best possible way. Couple of main deck feel that to go wide, and of course the usual suspects: Stronghold, Sandhome, couple of Lair Wests, and more basics now in order to make up for the uptick in Path to Exile slash Field of Ruin. That's the card that I was thinking of. When we look at the sideboard, again, no splash is really possible, right? Because we are choosing to run castle. I explained why already. But we have access to a couple of negates in the sideboard, a couple of Aether Gusts. Of course, this card exceptionally powerful in the mirror match, where even if your opponent is playing a primetime through a cavern, it just doesn't matter. You just put it on top or on the bottom of their deck. Very likely on top because it's just a good card. Aether Gust also very good against Blood Moon, against all the prowess decks. Definitely, definitely a good cyber card that started to see some play at this point. Even though it was printed in M20, which is obviously like a little bit back, but because the metagame was so Ursa, Simic Ursa focused and so Simic Ursa heavy, there was just like no need for playing Nethergust, right? Because if you played any non-Ursa, non-RT Ursa hate cards, then things started to, you would get got pretty easily because that deck was just absurd. You needed way too many cards in order to keep up with that deck. We have a couple of removal spells. We have Back to Baloth. I think this card is very very good. The uptick of Mono Red Prowess makes me want to play Baloth at this point in time. We have a couple of Force of Vigors. There's definitely a pretty large amount of people just playing Blood Moons. So whenever people play Blood Moon, we want to play Force of Vigor. It's pretty straightforward. Rex Age in the sideboard, and we see the appearance of a card that we have not really seen a lot before. And this card just continued to overperform for me. And when I just started testing it, I started testing this card because of, again, Dom Harvey, Saint Dom. Saint Dom, he figured out that Beast Within was a card that actually kills Ashiok. In the past, we have used Assassin's Trophy in order to kill Ashiok and Fry in order to kill Ashiok. But don't figure out that Beast Within actually kills Ashiok as well. And it does so only with green mana, so we don't need to splash anything. And I'm like, that is actually very smart. Let's check it out. The more that I played with Beast Within, the more impressed that I am by the card. And if you have been watching my streams, you can see me go progressively higher in numbers with Beast Within because this card just continues to overperform. I have destroyed Ashiok, obviously. I have destroyed Tronlands. I have destroyed Blood Moons. I have destroyed opposing Primeval Titans. I have destroyed Devoted Druids. What else? The other day when we were playing the combo deck, I destroyed the Ranger Captain of Eos. What else? You just, there's a bunch of problematic permanents that you can just like straight up get rid of with Beast Within and just be done with it, right? So this card just continues to overperform to the point where right now I'm rocking 3 Beast Within in my sideboard, and I don't think I'm looking back. This card is just very very good in our sideboard, and I like it a lot. Then we have finally the one of explosives, which has been a mainstay in my sideboard for years at this point. Very very good card in our deck. Um, Fast forward, January 24th. Release date of Theros Beyond Death. Now, a couple of things happened with Theros Beyond Death. Most important one of them, this sexy man that we see right here chilling with, like, I don't know, like some leaf of sorts. It kind of changed the spectrum of what is and what is not possible with Amulet, and it has brought the deck to the place where it is today, which we are going to explore right now pretty quickly. And by pretty quickly, it's probably like 20 minutes maybe. Okay, so we have access to castles. We want castles because castle is the nuts. I already talked about how good that card is. Bunch of basics, and I actually didn't read this card, so let's read this card real quick. 3 mana, 2/4. You may play an additional land on each one of your turns, so it's basically exploration, or as others may say, half of an Azusa. Lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types. So basically, Prismatic Omen. For those of you that are not familiar with Prismatic Omen, it saw some play in red green scape shift lists because it basically speeds up your kill, because you don't need as many mountains in play because you already have mountains. So if you have Valakut in play, if you have one Valakut and like 5 forests, if you have Prismatic Omen in play, it doesn't matter. Any land that enters the battlefield is going to trigger your Valakut. If you have 2 Valakuts and 4 basic forests, it doesn't matter. Any Titan, any land that comes into play is going to trigger both Valakuts. However, and this is the interesting thing about the build that we have arrived at today, and why, even though it's probably the best thing, it has some pros and some cons. So I have that. Yeah. I've even made a command about this guy. I was crazy when I once suggested to include this within in Cyber for Amulet. No, I mean, Asgard, if you suggested it here, I don't think that I could have called you crazy, because Beast Within has been in my amulet box for like 4 years or something. Back in the day, it was actually used as well, so I was aware of the existence of Beast Within, and I have actually played up to only one copy back in the day, but still, I have actually played Beast Within in the past. So I doubt that I would have called you crazy. I did call people who said the Dryad was broken crazy, though. And I'm going to explain my reasoning and the upside and the downside, because there's definitely a downside to playing this version of the deck. So let's go over. Of course, let's start with the upside first. This card, allows Amulet to do things that we should not be able to do. let's put it that way. You don't see Amulet lists running Lightning Bolt, right? You don't see Amulet lists running multiple Lightning Bolts every turn. You just don't see these things, and that is for a reason. It's because you can't give this deck access to something that it should not get access to, because it will get blown out of proportion. Dryad gives Amulet a way to kill the Voided Druid, beat Ensnaring Bridge. Now, if your opponent resolves an Ensnaring Bridge, you sometimes don't even care. You just get your Dryad and you just dome them for 1,000,000. It allows you to kill Infects creatures. It allows you to beat ad nauseum with like some stack trigger thingies that you can do, playing around. What's his name? Fractional life. It allows you to do some things that just honestly sometimes feel unfair. I just Venus and Bridge with that card as you can trust in the sentence. That's nice. That's so poetic. That's just so poetic. All right. One thing that you're gonna see is we're playing fetch lands now, and the reason for that it's actually pretty straightforward, right? If you have a Dryad in play and you have Valakut in play, your fetch lands trigger twice. Okay, because you can trigger when the fetch land enters play, and you also trigger when you fetch the land and you go find the land and the second land comes into play. So you actually trigger twice. One thing and one very common play pattern with this version of the deck is we have Amulet in play, we have Dryad in play, and we fetch. Now you're gonna see that we're playing Hand Warrior Battlements, and I know it looks super weird in Moto because it gets like split into 3 cards, but basically these and these don't matter at all, and these, damn it, this is what matters. Okay, so we tap for 1, and only the first ability is the one that matters. Red, tap, target creature gains haste until end of turn. The reason why this is relevant is because with the Titan trigger, we can fetch Valakut plus this, they untap because of the amulet, with a Dryad in play, obviously, right? Otherwise, of course, this doesn't work. So with a Dryad in play, we Titan, we get Valakut plus Battlements, we attack with Titan, we get second Valakut, and we get Vesuva copying the first Valakut that was already in play. That gives us 1, 2, 3 Valakuts in play. So both of these Valakuts will see each other, and they will actually dome your opponent for 18. Okay, so 3 for each Valakut, and twice because there were 2 lands that entered the battlefield. Of course, 18 plus a 6/6 trample attacker are going to be lethal more often than not. If it's not lethal, you can blow up your opponent's board. You can kill your opponent's planeswalkers. That's another big one that I didn't talk about. Dryad gives us an out to killing opposing planeswalkers. More importantly, Ashiok, which is pretty important. Have you removed after the Drake Titan pick Shining Valakut? Yeah, I have. So yeah, the way I see it is, let's say that this is the power level spectrum. Okay, this is the power level spectrum from here to here. This is, Hogak level power level, and this is Soul Sisters level power level, or Merfolk power level. Let's say Merfolk just to piss Nikachu off. But from the most powerful to the least powerful. Gio, thank you for the follow. Yeah, you actually see the the updated Drake meme right there. What Dryad did to Amulet is it turned the deck when the Dryad is in play to this level, power level. When the Dryad is not in play, the power level is here. Okay? If we go back to the list that I was showing earlier, which is something like this, the power level of this list is always going to be here. Okay? So this is a Titan without Dryad in the other list. This is where we're going to have where our power level is going to be always be with this list, right here in between. Okay, I hope this very weird way of showing this actually makes sense to everybody. So basically what I'm trying to explain is the power level of each one of our Titans is going to be significantly lower. Why is that? Well, first of all, because we don't have Boros Garrison. So even if we haste a Titan, if this Titan attacks, it's not going to be able to block. Okay? So what that means is that a big part of the power level of this Titan, with a list playing Garrison, Stronghold, and Sandhome, is the fact that Titan plays both offense and defense at the same time. It swings for 8, and it also is going to block your opponent's next turn. In this deck, that's just not a thing. We're just going to attack for 6, and that's it. Yeah? If we don't have a Dryad in play, we actually have 2 lands that literally don't do anything. These are ETB tapped lands that tap for red mana. These are horrendous lands to have in play. These are horrendous lands to draw from the top of your deck. Yeah? Howard Battlement is able to haste, but it doesn't give vigilance, and it also doesn't give power, which means that your scouts and your Azuzas, and even potentially post sideboard your tireless trackers and your bailouts slash reclamation sages are going to be a much more anemic clock. And this, I mean, you might laugh at about this, but this actually does come up fairly often. Let's speak over a scale of 100 without Dryad in between, 90 to 65 constantly, with Dryad 130. Yeah, that's a correct assessment, Dennis. That's exactly what I was trying to explain. So you can see all of the different ways that we are actually making our deck worse by putting these cards if we don't have this in play. However, if we do have this in play, the power level of the deck skyrockets significantly, right? Another thing that changes, another thing that Dryad kind of like messes up, quote unquote, is your turn 2 kills. Before we have access to the turn 2 kill thanks to Azusa, second amulet, right? Our PCs for a turn 2 kill are Azusa, 2 amulets, Primetime, or a Pact. Of course, either Azusa or Primetime can be a Pact. Any land, any bounce land that taps for green. That's it. This is our turn 2 kill. Now we actually have to work much harder for that turn 2 kill because we're also going to need a Dryad. And we're also going to need more lands, actually. Because we need to make sure that when the Titan finally attacks, it's going to do it by... putting more lands. But usually this, what this does is it gives you access to, for the first Titan, to go get Simic plus Tularia West and transmit for another Titan, so you can usually resolve 2 Titans. So there's still a turn 2 kill, but now we have to have the absolute perfects, right? So you need to have those 7 in order to kill on turn 2. However, your turn 3 plus kills are going to be more reliable. And again, you're going to be able to present as like Tom. I remember when Tom Martel was doing, was playing Summer Bloom back in the Summer Bloom days, and he was doing very well with it. He would call it the turn 2 pseudo kill. And this is basically the turn 3 pseudo kill that puts you at a that puts you in a situation where your opponent just cannot you cannot recover from. I'm so sick of Amulet. Hey, Ring. I mean, you're free to go. You don't have to be here if you don't want to check. If you don't like Amulet, just nobody's forcing you to be here. All right, so I'm going to explain the turn 2 kill really quickly. So turn 1, we play any land. I'm choosing Cavern just because it was here. It has to be an untapped land, ETB untapped land. We play Amulet. That's our turn 1. Turn 2, we tap the same land. We play the second Amulet. We play Simigrowth Chamber. We tap for 4 mana. We use we bounce Simigrowth Chamber again to hand. We use 3 of those mana. We have 1 mana floating. We play Azusa, right? We replay Simigrowth Chamber. That's our second land drop of the turn. We go up to 5 mana. We play the third land drop of the turn. We go up to 9 mana. Yeah, I'm running out of hands. Use 3 of those mana. Cast Dryad. We play 1 more land up to 10 mana. Now we play Primetime down to 4 mana. Primetime gets Simigrowth Chamber plus Tularia West. We tap this twice. That's plus 6 more mana, up to 10 again. We bounce Tularia West. We use 3 of this mana, 3 of the 10 mana that we have floating, down to 7 to to transmute for a Summoner's Pact. We Summoner's Pact for another Primetime. We cast the second Primetime down to 1 mana. The second Primetime gets Valakut plus Howard Battlements. We haste both Titans. And then we do the kill that I just said earlier. We get Valakut plus Vesuva. Vesuva copy in the Valakut, and we're gonna have five lands at this time. And then with the second Titan trigger, we're actually gonna have 7 lands in play, which means we're gonna be able to trigger the Valakuts. Yeah, so that is the explanation of the turn to kill. It's slightly more convoluted than it was before, but it still gets the job done. You know, it's just a little bit less likely than it used to be. So many people complain about it. I see he complain about Blood Moon like I have been since I started playing Tron up till. That's funny. Filled with Vesuva, continue Titan action is still powerful. Yes, yes, but we're only playing one field of that. Oh, one thing that I wanted to talk about. I tried to explain this in the past, and I explained this in the first Demystifying Amulet video. But it's about the way that these cards work and the way that stacking extra land drops actually works. So I'm going to try to do my best to explain how this works, so you can make sure that you are aware of this while you're playing, because things can get complicated, especially when removal is involved. All right, so the way to keep this in mind is you always want to look at the amount of lands that you have, the amount of land drops that you have made, and compare that at any point to the amount of land drops that you have available. Let me use an example. So, we play our Azusa and we make 1 land drop. Okay? We have made 1 land drop. Okay? We play a second land. We've made 2 land drops. In response to this trigger, our opponent bolts the Azusa dice. Okay? Now we play a Dryad into play. What Dryad does is Dryad says you get to play 1 additional land. However, so far we've played 2 lands. The Azusa is gone, so the effect of the Azusa is not alive anymore. Yeah? And if we look at the amount of lands that we have, the land drops that we have made, we've made 2 land drops. So what that means is that Dryad is not going to give us any more land drops this turn, because the Dryad effect is in play, and we have made 2 land drops. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. Explore works in a similar fashion. The difference with Explore is that it doesn't, it's not like Azusa, it just lasts until the end of the turn. So if the Explore resolves, they can't kill the Explorer, so you can't get rid of the extra land drop, right? So if you combine the Dryad with the Explorer, let's say that you explore, right? You start the turn and you explore. You make 1 land drop, you make 2 land drops, you play Dryad, you have 1 extra land drop, right? You have made 2 land drops so far, but that is because of the Explore effect. So if the Dryad is there, you're still fine. Does that make sense? Just like if we cast a Neo Suicide, it won't give us 2 fresh 2 drops. Exactly. That is actually correct. So if you have an Azusa and you use all of your land drops, so you make 3 land drops this turn, and then you play a second Azusa, the new Azusa is going to look at the amount of land drops that you made and going to say, yo, you already made 2 land drops. You're done. In the past, this is like 3, maybe 4 years ago, the rules allowed you to do this, but the rules worked differently back then. It was more complicated. It didn't make as much sense. So if you talk with somebody that hasn't played Magic in and they used to play Amulet like 4 or 5 years ago, and they haven't played Amulet since, then yeah, it's gonna be confusing for that person. But yeah, the way it works is just the way as I explained it right now. So hopefully that made sense. As soon as speaks like yo, they're triggered for the type. Yeah, I don't know. She might have been more like arigato, you know? I don't know. All right, so I hope that made sense. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that I want to cover here in terms of the Dryad versions. Yes, as I was talking about the cost of making this card better is playing cards that are worse in our deck, right? So instead of playing an extra fielder deck, now we're playing a Valakut that doesn't do anything. Instead of playing Sunhome, which is a card that gives me double strike, now we're playing a card that doesn't do anything. Instead of playing a card that gives us +2/+0 haste and vigilance, we're playing a card that only gives haste, right? So that is literally the changes that have been made here. Also, if we are not playing the Valakut package, I actually don't think that I like playing fetch lands. I think I would rather play more copies of Breeding Pool. So that is also something that I wanted to point out, because the fetch lands are even worse against Ashiok, and in some matchups you will legit just run out of targets, like in Field of Ruin and in Field of Ruin and Path to Exile matchups, so especially against like Blue White or Band Control and stuff like that, you just run out of targets at some point. And having lands that don't fetch anything, it's kind of a big deal. So yeah. When he's played from the Dryad, he looks stoned. He doesn't look stoned. He just looks naked. Um, all right. I hope that clarifies the whole like Dryad, the Dryad debacle. Um, the question is Handwear and Fetches or Sandhome Slayer's Boros, which is better? Well, one thing is that you can probably do both at the same time. But again, and this is why what I'm saying and why I was saying, like using the spectrum, in terms of like trying to explain the power level. Because what we can do is we can just like go ahead and just play two Valakuts and just play the Sunhome, the Stronghold here, play maybe the Boros Garrison here, and I guess this would be the Boros Garrison, and this is the Sunhome. So you can kind of like find a way to make everything fit. But while doing so, now your play patterns are going to be a little bit clunkier. This is going to allow you to still have access to a turn 2 kill. However, your play patterns, and again your Dryad Titans, let's call them Dryad Titans, meaning when we play a Titan with a Dryad in play, your Dryad Titans are going to be significantly less powerful because now we don't really have access to this play pattern anymore, right? So that is definitely something to test and to try out. And I'm still not sold on the list that I'm going to be playing at regionals. So I'm going to be doing some more testing in that regard for sure. But this is the list that I have been playing with lately, and I've been doing okay with it. I'm not like I don't have ridiculous win percentages or something like that, but I've been consistently 4-1 plus with it, with a couple of 3-2s and 2-3s in there, of course, like it always happens. But it's not like doing Karn Amulet where I was literally 4-1 in every single league. There's more. My win percentage is a little bit lower than it was back then. But yeah, I hope I have covered most of the things that I wanted to talk about. I talk about the pros and cons, and I actually wanted to cover something, which is somebody asked the question on, I think it was on the Discord, where they say what matchup is Dryad bad in? And the truth is that with this configuration, um, Chronic, thank you for the follow. With this configuration, the way that we have built our deck is to rely 100% on the presence of Dryad. So if you're playing this list, you can never ever trim a Dryad. It's just not a thing that you can afford to do. So that's just not a possibility. If you are building your deck in order to try to like flex a little bit, to have a more flexible, I mean, not to flex, if you in order to have a more flexible sideboard plan, if there are some matchups where you might want to cut the Dryad, because there are some matchups where the Dryad is actually kind of bad. The one that the most obviously comes to mind is Jund, where they have like infinite removal, and if they are gonna kill your Dryad. Because something very important, in case people didn't know about this, The way Valakut works is it checks when it triggers, and it also checks on resolution, which is something that's interesting that I'm going to explain right now. The way Valakut works is you need to have 6 mountains. Let's say that you have any 6 lands, whatever, it doesn't matter. This checks when it triggers. So we have 5 lands in play and we have a Dryad, right? Boom, 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 boom. We play the 6th land and Valakut triggers. Yep. We choose a target. We target our opponent's face. And on resolution, Valakut is going to check again. If we do not have 6 mountains in play when the trigger resolves, Valakut is gonna not trigger. The effect is not gonna happen, is what I mean, right? So what I'm trying to explain here is, even if you have all your triggers on the stack, if your Dryad dies, nothing is gonna happen. Okay? This is very, very important, because if I'm playing against an Amulet player and I have like a Dismember or a Beast Within, and they get to resolve a Titan, I am going to let them resolve their triggers. I'm going to let them fetch for their lands and make sure that they get, I don't know, Valakut. Like, they have a Dryden player, they're feeling happy or whatever. And they could have chained Titans, right? They could have gone for Simic, Tolaria. But they instead go for Valakut, and they're like, yeah, attack you for lethal. If I kill the Dryad in response with a Dismember or something, that's it. Like, my opponent does not have another access to another Titan, and they don't have a Dryad in play. And if I'm able to answer this Titan, that's it. I'm gonna take over from there, right? And of course, unless they draw another Titan or they draw another Dryad or whatever. But what I'm trying to explain here is that if your opponent has removal for your Dryad, you want to be very, very careful that you're not leaving yourself with the pants down, in case this guy dies. So certainly you want to be watching out for that, because it could be a problem, and you might end up getting yourself, basically. So you want to be careful. Been watching you on YouTube, so glad to catch you. Oh, sweet, Chronic. Yeah, welcome to the stream. I ran traditional turn 2 until today. I'm gonna run the Hunger this weekend in a couple of places and see how I like it. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying things out and see what happens. But yeah, so as I was saying, after explaining how Valakut works, I'm pretty sure that all of you can figure out why this plan is, in most situations, not great against something like Jund, right? Where they are going to have like a shit ton of removal to get rid of our Dryad. And not even that, but the Dryad is an enchantment creature, so it's going to put an enchantment in the graveyard, which is going to grow your opponent's Goyfs, which is not a small deal. It's actually pretty relevant very often. So, if I were playing Boros, Stronghold, and Sunhome in that matchup, I could see myself trimming down one Valakut, and potentially trimming some number of Dryads. It's a John matchup, so I'm probably gonna like scout any more, way more. But I'm talking about, let's say, something like Blue White, where again, same situation. They have access to a ton of removal, but actually Scout is great in that matchup, so I don't want to side Scout. So in the blue-white matchup, in a situation like that, I might actually be able to side out some number of Dryads. Because of how I'm building my deck right now with this configuration, you just cannot afford to do that in any matchup. That is just the way your deck is constructed. You cannot side out Dryad. You might be able to side out Valakut, maybe like against blue white or something. Although I think I would rather side out some castles against blue white. But anyway, when I'm trying to like explain the point here. But yeah, with this construction of the deck with Hunger Battlements, that's just not an option. That's just not something that you should be doing. So that's one of the questions that we had from Discord. Another question that we got from, I think this one was actually from the Facebook group. I asked multiple people on, I guess I asked people on multiple platforms if they could cover this, and that's what I'm trying to do right now. And one of the questions was, should we go back to Karn? Should we ever go back to playing Karn? And the reason the reason for that is the reason why I think that we most likely will not ever go back to Karn is because number one, this guy would need to get banned because this is just a much better plan B than Karn. Second of all, it would require a very very wild change in the metagame. Like the lattice banning doesn't really affect us in this matter. Like we were not really a lattice lock you out we who kind of like deck. We were mostly a Karn value deck that had the option to potentially lock you out, right? Which is very different to something like E-Tron or even more so Big Tron, um, where the lattice lock was like kind of like a very very important part of the game plan and a very big, very important part of the reason why Karn the Great Creator was played in Tron in the first place, right? So we don't care too much about the lattice ban. The only problem is the fact that we have better options right now, and as far as having a B plan goes, and second of all, Karn doesn't host anything right now. Cherry, how's it going? Thank you for the raid. Welcome everybody from Cherry's stream. We're doing the Mystifying Amulet Titan, where I'm explaining basically anything I can and everything. I'm trying to cover all the bases as far as where Amulet is and how we got here. So we're getting towards the end. I'm gonna play a league as well. But this is the end of this is coming towards the end of the Demystifying Amulet bit. Um, so what was I saying? Yeah. Oh, not going back to Karn. That was what we were talking about. So because this is just a much better B plan, and Karn doesn't really host anything anymore. Um, I don't think that we're gonna be going back to Karn unless I don't know, like what's the name of the Embry deck? That's the because like the new Underworld Breach deck, for example, the new Underworld Breach deck kind of gets hosted pretty hard by Karn. So if that somehow becomes like 20% of the meta, then I'm gonna be fine. We're not gonna be talking about sideboard plans yet, Cheese Sample, but I am, however, presenting um, my updated sideboard guide for subscribers, and that's actually a great segue. Great question, Cheese Sample. It's almost like I asked you to be here, you know. Going forward, do you believe the second fetch land is better than the second cavern? I don't know, Oliver. I don't know. It's possible. Like right now, with the way that the meta is shaping up, I don't think that counter magic decks are very very prevalent. The blue black Ursa deck is the big one, but more often than not, what I'm seeing Blood Moon decks instead. I'm seeing the mono red prowess deck everywhere. I'm seeing the the um, the red green Ponza deck, and of course against those decks, we'd much rather have access to fetch lands, which are basic proxies, than we would rather have access to cavern. So yes, I think that it's a very possible change. Also, of course, fetch land makes castle much better, so that's also a big part of the consideration. But I could see making that cut if I expect a lot of, like for example, in the SCG tour, a lot of people like the blue black Ursa deck a lot, so I could see it, playing second cavern if I were playing in the SCG tour or something. But yeah. All right. Right, liar. Bloodman is an evil card. Yeah, we can agree there. We can agree there for sure. No white anymore. Yeah, I explained earlier why playing castle basically limits your possibilities of splashing. Of course, Dryad fixing your mana is very real, but I don't think that you can splash white or red, even black, if relying on the fact that hopefully you get a Dryad in play. The one that you're closer to being able to splash is red because of the Valakuts, obviously, but it's still like a very very limited amount of red sources, right? We could play maybe like a stomping ground somewhere, and that would bring your amount of sources up to 8, which is still very very low. So I don't like splashing, honestly. We can turn this maybe 9. turn this into another Gruul turf. I don't think it's worth splashing, basically. Um, ¿Puedo escribirte en español alguna, aunque me respondas unas dudas? Sí, seguro, Darth Kid. Te respondo en inglés para tratar de, ¿viste? De que todo el mundo entienda. I think there's nothing bad that can be said about cream pies, poggers. Cherry bringing his chat is kind of like having sex with someone but not mentioning that you have AIDS. Wow, that's brutal. So bad, Cherry Chat. Do you think Amulet can be playing non-ban list? That's a good question. I think it's possible. I think it's possible. I have not really tinkered with the idea, but probably if I were to do that, I would try to go with a turbo combo kind of way to try to play it. So try to go ahead and just jam Simian Spirit Guides and like amulets and try to like go mono combo with hide mine and stuff to try to combo as soon as possible with Summer Bloom. His chat was on a roll today. Nice. Do you think the Jeskai Breed matchup is good or bad? And any key points? Honestly, I have not played the Jeskai Breed matchup even a single time so far. The key cards seem to be Bojuku Bog and Stacy, obviously, because it allows you to for instant speed interaction. Pact of Negation, as long as your opponent doesn't have a guy in play, and Engineering Explosions on 2. Those seem to be like the key spots. So you want to try to E on 2 preemptively for sure, and you want to kind of like use your Pact of Negation smartly and try to get Bojuki Bog. Keeping their graveyard empty actually makes it a little bit harder for them to go off. So that's something that you want to keep in mind. So even if they have like a couple of fetch lands and stuff, you want to make sure that you are getting value from your Bojuki Bog. Maybe not game winning value unless you get very lucky, but still. R Train with a tweet from Sub. Welcome to the Primetime Stronghold, R Train. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the support. And if you'd like to have access to the cyber guide, you need to join Discord. All right. For those of you that are new, I am going to be uploading as soon as this stream is over. I'm going to upload the cyber guide. Okay, so you're gonna have access to it as soon as the stream is available. In fact, I'm gonna take a break right after I'm done with the demystifying section, so you actually can follow the cyber instructions for the league. Okay, so I'm gonna take care of that while I take the little break. And Darth Kids, thank you so much for the Twitter sub. Welcome to the Primetime Stronghold. Thank you so much for the support. All right, what is my opinion on Hive Mind as an alternative win condition in the current meta? I think it's not very good. Again, like we have access to a just strictly better alternative win condition, so I don't know. I don't think that Hive Mind is the way to go. Even the alternate win condition, I feel that seems better than Hive Mind, honestly. ¿Has probado la Green White rival de Twitter X Whale? Me parece una buena el metajuego de ahora mismo. Darkid lo he streameado, así que si querés chequear mis videos en YouTube, vas a ver ahí cómo lo jugué una liga con el juego, con el mazo de él. There's Misstep and Chalice in no ban list, so that hitting Amulet is really bad. Yes, I can see that. But I mean, you're still playing Summer Bloom, right? You're still going to be playing like 28 lands. So one of the things with Summer Bloom was precisely that, and I can also play my own missteps, so I can misstep my opponent's misstep. So there's that. Cherry Chad has adopted this form for easier rolling. Nice. Jerry Thompson in his podcast said the time of having a Titan Tier 1 is end with the new version of Breach and Control deck and Heliod Infinite Life combo. What do you think? Well, Heliod Infinite Life combo, it's possible, but it's like that deck is just not heavily playable, and I have beaten it multiple times here on stream as well. So I'm not so concerned about that deck specifically. The Breach deck, maybe it is, but yeah, I mean, honestly, I hope that Amulet is not Tier 1 anymore, so I don't have to worry about getting banned, because I literally ordered my playset of Dryad full art Dryads today. So I really hope that they don't get banned. Making steak tonight. Does anyone have with lemon pepper marinade wrap recipe? uh, I don't, unfortunately. The way that Argentinians make steak is on the parrilla. How do you say parrilla? Parrilla. I don't even know how to say. It's anyway. Don't worry about it. It's irrelevant. Asado. Google asado and you'll be fine. Would you add another Pact of Negation main deck? I'm thinking this version is a lot more consistent to have turn 3 or turn 4 kills instead of 4 Azusa. Nope. If you want to have turn 3 or turn 4 kills, then you want more Azusas, you don't want less. And if I were to add another card instead of an Azusa, I would add Explore. I'll put a hat between your boss and the back again, please. Oh, yeah, sorry, my bad. My bad. Apologize for that. Yeah, I basically don't think you ever want 2-pack negation in the main deck. There's no Uro command. Oh yeah, that's right. I didn't talk about Uro. Nice. Thank you, OP Magician. So I've been having some fun playing some Uro decks lately, and one of the Uro decks that I played was actually Amulet Titan. So I played one Uro in the main deck and one Uro in the sideboard. The card was very mediocre and just not very good for us. However, when it was good, which was in exactly one match out of 20 played, it was insanely good. Which was against a Stoneblade opponent, where it just came down and took over. We had been trading resources for like 12 turns, and then Uro came down, and it was not close anymore. So yeah, basically the front side is just terrible. It's very very bad. So the front side is just not worth it. It's probably even a worse Explorer. So it's a matter of making sure that you can get the back end, and the back end is really really easy, really really hard to actually trigger because we're not very good at putting cards in our graveyard. Right, all of our stuff are literally permanent. So we very often just win or lose games with like 3 cards in our graveyard total. Um, More often wins than lose, but still, like that's not what you want. This is not an Uro deck. However, as a sideboard card, I think that it's worse than Baloth in the aggro matchups by a very significant margin. So against something like Mono Red Prowess or against something like Burn, Obstinate Baloth is infinitely better than Uro, and Uro is better against stuff like Jund or, as I was saying, Stoneblade and like grindier decks like that are going to basically put a lot of cards in our graveyard by countering them or destroying them in different ways and stuff like that. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Uro. Um, it's fun. It's a fun card. When you're playing basically I really enjoy playing decks that are more geared toward getting value out of Uro, and I've been actually doing a lot. So you can check out all my previous videos in my YouTube channel. I've been playing a lot of Uro lately. um all right, closing thoughts. Basically, I don't think that we're done. I don't think that we're done. I don't think that this is the absolute best build of Amulet, because the absolute best build of Amulet I don't think exists. I think that the absolute best build of Amulet is something that depends on a week to week kind of pattern. Basically, the best build one day it's not going to be the best build the next week, and this is why we see players like Edgar, Matt Dilks, and Daryl consistently putting up great results with the deck. It's because they always build their deck in order to beat the meta they expect to face. So that is why, this is the list that I'm playing right now, and this is the list I'm playing right now for the Magic Online metagame. I don't know if this is the list that I'm going to play this weekend in regionals, because I don't know what the metagame at my regionals is going to be. So I have to figure that out, and once I figure that out, I'm going to make adjustments according to that. All I can say is that the main deck looks very very solid, and barring any kind of bannings or something like that, it's going to be between something like this or something like this, trying to accommodate Boros Garrison and Slayer Stronghold. So those are my final thoughts. I think that right now Amulet might be the best deck in the format. I think that I haven't seen that bridge deck taking over just yet. If it does, things might change a little bit, and of course, we are going to need to adapt our sideboard accordingly, like we always do. But if that is the case, we're going to see when we have to cross the bridge, right? Thoughts on Grove of the Burn Willows. We're playing this card, so all of those cards that are sweet and are like nice value become immediately unplayable because these are just like strictly better versions of that card. So I don't think that Grove is good, and even when it was good, I don't think it was that good anyway. I don't think that you're gonna turn around the Shadow matchup by playing Grove of the Willows, even if it's 3 copies. I just don't think it's that good in the matchup. Um, but yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to talk about today. And I'm gonna take a short break. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much for having checked out this video. Hope that I was able to enlighten you a little bit about the new versions and the evolution of Amulet for the past 7 months or so. Um, and I appreciate you checking out the video, and I appreciate your interest in the archetype. That this is a fun deck that hopefully you're having some fun with. Personally, I do think that the Dryad um, has made the deck a little bit more straightforward than it used to be. In the first Amulet, Demystifying Amulet video, I talk about how the deck is a toolbox deck first and a combo deck second. I think this deck has turned the needle way closer to combo than it used to be. However, I still think that it allows for a ton of adaptation and it allows for a ton of play, and I'm still enjoying it and I'm still having fun. So as long as I'm still enjoying it and having fun with the deck, and I just can't get enough of it, I'm just gonna keep on playing it. Even if it's a little bit less like fun in the abstract or whatever, I'm just gonna keep on doing my thing, and I'm just gonna keep on casting Primeval Titans, and I hope that you are as well. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video where I will be playing a league with this list that you see right now on stream. Bye bye and take care.